I walked out of the hospital heading home after a long shift, but fate had other plans. Halfway down my walk, an accident occurred. Gosh, are they still alive? Something in me just always want to help people. The moment I saw him, something in me changed. Was it his eyes or the way he held my hand even when facing death? Whatever it was, I was gonna get to the bottom of it. But first I must save him, huh? Will he survive? Before we continue on this roller coaster journey of survival, love at first sight and survival, you're welcome to my channel Afro Korean Tales. Please hit the like and subscribe button to support the channel. Let's continue. Chicago's October wind cut through Alice Mwangi's scrubs as she stepped out of Northwestern Memorial Hospital. 12 hours in the trauma ward had left her exhausted, but she'd saved 3 lives today. That count still mattered, even after 3 years of American emergency rooms. The L station was 2 blocks away. She walked quickly, naturally alert in a way that came from growing up in Nairobi. Her work visa was secure now, her green card application in process, but the habits of vigilance remained. The screech of tires made her turn. The black Mercedes came around the corner too fast, clipping a delivery truck before slamming into a concrete barrier with a sound like a bomb detonating. Metal twisted. Glass exploded across wet pavement. The delivery driver stumbled out of his truck, screaming into his phone. Alice was already running. Training overrode exhaustion, fear, and common sense. She'd taken an oath. The rest was just details. Her heart hammered in her chest, adrenaline flooding her system as she sprinted toward the wreckage. The crowd gathering around the accident parted instinctively as they saw her hospital ID badge. The Mercedes driver was clearly dead, his neck bent at an angle that made Alice's stomach clench with familiar professional grief. But movement in the back seat caught her attention. A man in an expensive suit slumped against the door, blood streaming from a head wound and chest injury. Dark hair with hints of silver at the temples despite looking maybe 37. Asian features. His breathing was shallow, wet, wrong. Alice wrenched open the back door, ignoring the growing crowd of onlookers with their phones out, documenting tragedy instead of helping. The man's eyes flickered open, unfocused at first, gray and cold even in their confusion. Then they found her face. "Help me," he rasped, voice barely audible over the chaos around them. His hand moved weakly toward her, fingers trembling with the effort. "Please, help me." Something in his eyes, in the desperation of his voice, struck Alice deeply. This wasn't just another patient. This was a man clinging to life by his fingernails, placing all his hope in a stranger who'd appeared out of nowhere. "I've got you," Alice said, her voice calm and steady despite her racing heart. "Stay with me. I'm a nurse. I'm going to help you." He made a wet sound in response. Blood bubbled from his lips. Punctured lung. She had maybe 5 minutes before he drowned in his own blood. Alice's training kicked in with crystalline clarity, driven by fierce determination. She wouldn't let him die. Couldn't let him die. His chest wasn't rising properly on the left side. Tension pneumothorax. Air was filling his chest cavity, collapsing his lung, pushing his heart to the wrong side. Without intervention, he'd be dead before the ambulance arrived. Alice grabbed the pen from her bag, unscrewed it, dumped the ink cartridge with hands that trembled slightly. Not sterile, but death wasn't sterile either. She felt for the intercostal space between his ribs, said a prayer her grandmother had taught her years ago in Nairobi, and drove the hollow pen tube through skin and muscle into his chest cavity. Air hissed out with a sound like a tire deflating. The man gasped, a horrible sucking sound that made the crowd gasp in horror and fascination. Then he started breathing. Shallow, pained, but breathing. His gray eyes found hers again, and in them Alice saw something that made her breath catch. Recognition. Gratitude. Something she couldn't name but felt deeply. "Stay with me," Alice commanded, pressing her jacket against his chest wound to slow the bleeding. Her hands were steady now, all hesitation gone. "You're not dying on this street. Do you understand me? You're not dying today." His eyes held hers for a long moment, and Alice felt electricity shoot through her at the contact. Something passed between them in that moment, some recognition neither could name but both felt deeply. His hand moved weakly, fingers brushing her wrist, and the touch sent warmth flooding through her despite the cold October wind. Then his eyes rolled back and he went limp. Alice checked his pulse with fingers that wanted to shake but didn't dare. Still there. Steady enough. She maintained pressure on the wound, aware of sirens approaching but knowing ambulances in Chicago traffic could take precious minutes they might not have. That's when the SUVs arrived. 3 black Escalades materialized like sharks smelling blood, screeching to stops that blocked traffic in all directions. Men poured out, 6 of them, moving with military precision that made Alice's mouth go dry with sudden fear. They wore expensive suits but carried themselves like soldiers. Like men who knew violence intimately. The tallest one, with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, took one look at the scene and started barking orders in Korean. His hand moved inside his jacket. And Alice knew with cold certainty he was reaching for a weapon. Her heart hammered harder, but she didn't move her hands from the chest wound. "Step away from him," Scar said in heavily accented English, his eyes hard and distrustful. He looked at her like she might be a threat. "If I step away, he dies," Alice replied, keeping her voice steady despite her hammering heart and the fear crawling up her spine. She didn't move her hands from the chest wound, didn't break eye contact with this dangerous man. He has a tension pneumothorax and significant blood loss. Moving him incorrectly will kill him faster than the accident did. Are you willing to explain to whoever you work for that you let him die because you didn't trust the person who saved his life?" Scar's hand stayed inside his jacket. His eyes raked over her, taking in her blood-soaked scrubs, her hospital ID badge, the pen tube still protruding from his boss's chest. Suspicion radiated from him in waves. "How do we know you're really a nurse? How do we know you didn't cause this crash?" The accusation stung. "Trauma ward, 3 years. Check my credentials if you want, but do it fast because your boss is bleeding out while we have this conversation." Another man stepped forward, older, with gray at his temples and calculating eyes that missed nothing. He spoke in rapid Korean to Scar, his tone sharp and commanding. Then he switched to English. "Park, she performed an emergency needle decompression. She saved his life. Look at the technique." Park didn't look convinced, but he moved his hand away from his weapon. The tension in his shoulders remained. "Fine. We take him to our doctor." "Your doctor isn't equipped for this." Alice kept her tone professional, urgency bleeding through. "He needs a hospital. Operating room. Blood transfusions. Equipment your doctor doesn't have. Northwestern Memorial is 8 blocks away. It's where I work. They can handle this." "No hospitals," Park said flatly. "Too many questions. Police involvement. Our doctor handles our medical issues." Frustration surged through Alice. "Then your boss dies, and you explain to his organization why you ignored the medical professional who was keeping him alive." She met Park's eyes without flinching. "I don't know who he is. I don't care. But if you move him without proper equipment and medical support, he won't survive the trip. Is that what you want?" The older man stepped closer, studying her with unnerving intensity. "You're not American. Your accent. Kenyan?" "Yes." Alice saw no point in lying. The man nodded slowly. "I'm Kong Lee, head of security for Mr. Jumong. Ji-Han Jumong." He looked at Park. "We go to Northwestern. She comes with us. She keeps him alive." The sirens were getting closer. Park looked at Kong Lee, then nodded reluctantly. Get a stretcher from your vehicle, Alice directed. We need to immobilize his spine and keep pressure on this wound during transport. Move him wrong and you kill him yourselves. They moved with impressive efficiency. One of the SUVs had medical supplies, including a proper stretcher and C-collar. Alice directed them through immobilizing the injured man, maintaining the pen tube decompression, packing the chest wound. The crowd had backed away from the intimidating men in suits, and by the time the ambulance arrived, the SUVs were already pulling away with Alice and their boss inside. She found herself in the back of the center Escalade, kneeling beside the stretcher, maintaining pressure on the wound while Park drove with aggressive precision. Kong Lee sat across from her, watching every move she made. What does Mr. Jumong do? Alice asked, checking his pulse again. Still steady. But he'd lost so much blood. Import and export business, Kong Lee said smoothly. The lie was obvious. Very successful. Very private. Which is why hospitals present complications. Alice didn't respond. The words hung between them, both knowing the truth neither would speak. They reached Northwestern Memorial in 6 minutes. Kong Lee directed Park to the main emergency entrance. I work here, Alice said. They know me. Let me handle this. She rushed through the doors with Ji-Han on the stretcher, Kong Lee's men following. The emergency staff moved immediately, recognizing Alice and seeing the critical condition of her patient. Dr. Santos looked at her, then at the intimidating men in suits surrounding the stretcher. Appeared, one of the senior trauma surgeons. He'd been in emergency medicine long enough to recognize when a situation had complications. He took one look at the pen tube in Ji-Han's chest and Alice's blood-soaked scrubs. You know his case better than anyone. Car accident. He glanced at Kong Lee. Tension pneumothorax. Your men stay outside the OR. I performed emergency needle decompression on scene with a pen. Kong Lee nodded. He's got a punctured lung. She stays with blood loss. Possible head trauma. That's non-negotiable. Alice rattled off vitals as they wheeled Ji-Han into the trauma bay. The surgery took 4 hours. Good work, Dr. Alice Santos assisted said, despite already examining the patient. Her hands steady as Dr. Santos take it from repaired the punctured lung, removed bone fragments, stitched internal bleeding. Every suture felt like a victory. Every stable vital sign filled her with fierce satisfaction. When they finally wheeled Ji-Han to the ICU recovery room, Kong Lee had been waiting outside the OR the entire time, along with Park and 4 other men who radiated barely contained violence. He'll live? Kong Lee asked, and Alice heard genuine worry beneath his controlled tone. If he makes it through the next 48 hours without complications, Dr. Santos said. The next 24 are critical. He lost significant blood. The head trauma could cause swelling. We won't know about brain damage until he wakes up. Alice felt her chest tighten at those words. Brain damage. After everything, he might wake up changed. Or not wake up at all. When will that be? Could be hours. Could be days. We've induced a medical coma to let his body heal. We'll try to wake him in 72 hours if his vitals stay stable. Kong Lee nodded, then looked at Alice. Thank you, Miss Mwangi. You saved Mr. Jumong's life. We're grateful. Alice nodded, exhaustion finally catching up with her. The adrenaline that had kept her going for the past 6 hours was fading fast. I should go home. Get some rest. Dr. Santos and the ICU staff will take excellent care of him. Wait. Kong Lee stepped forward, his expression serious. Miss Mwangi, I need to ask you something. Mr. Jumong's life is still in danger. Not just from his injuries, but from the people who caused the accident. They'll want to finish what they started. Alice felt a chill run through her. You think they'll try again? I know they will. The moment they learn he survived, they'll come for him. Kong Lee's eyes were hard. The hospital staff are competent, but they don't understand the threat. They don't know what to watch for. You do. You've already proven you can think quickly under pressure. I'm a trauma nurse, not a bodyguard, Alice said. We're not asking you to be a bodyguard. We have men for that. Kong Li gestured to the guard stationed outside the ICU room. We're asking you to be his nurse. To monitor him personally. To watch for anything unusual, anything that doesn't fit normal hospital procedures. To be the medical professional who knows his case and can spot danger. Alice hesitated. She was exhausted. She wanted nothing more than to go home, shower, sleep in her own bed. Dr. Santos and the ICU nurses here are excellent. They can. They don't know Mr. Jumong's enemies, Kong Li interrupted. They don't understand how ruthless these people are. But you saw it tonight. You saw the accident, the violence, the determination to kill him. You understand what we're dealing with. Park stepped forward. We need someone we can trust. Someone who's already saved his life once. Someone who won't be intimidated or bribed or fooled. Alice looked at Ji-Han through the ICU room window. Unconscious, vulnerable, machines keeping him alive. She thought about those gray eyes looking at her on that street, asking for help. I have my own shifts at the hospital, Alice said. I can't just abandon my responsibilities. We'll handle that, Kong Li said. We'll arrange coverage for your shifts. Pay you for your time. Whatever you need. He paused. Name your price, Miss Mwangi. Money is not an issue. Alice bristled slightly. This isn't about money. Then what is it about? I need to understand what I'm getting into. Why someone would want him dead badly enough to orchestrate an accident. Who he really is. Alice met Kong Li's eyes. You said import and export business. We both know that's not the whole truth. Kong Li studied her for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. You're right. Mr. Jumong operates in complicated territories. He has power. Territory. Resources that others want. That makes him a target. Organized crime, Alice said flatly. Business, Kong Li corrected. In a world where the rules are different than what you're used to. But yes, dangerous business. Business that comes with enemies who don't hesitate to kill. Alice should have walked away. Should have gone home, back to her normal life, away from this dangerous world. But she thought about Ji-Han's fingers brushing her wrist, the electricity she'd felt. The way he'd looked at her with such desperate hope. The connection she couldn't name but couldn't deny. How long? Alice asked. How long would you need me? Through the critical period. 72 hours at minimum. Until he wakes up and we can move him somewhere more secure. Kong Li's expression softened slightly. We're not asking you to commit to anything beyond keeping him alive through the immediate danger. Alice looked at Ji-Han again. She'd put her hands in his chest, breathed life back into his lungs. Walking away now felt like leaving the job unfinished. I'll stay through the critical period, Alice said finally. 72 hours. But I need some things. A change of clothes. My medical bag from home. And I need to know you won't interfere with my medical decisions. If I say he needs something, it happens immediately. Done, Kong Li said with visible relief. Whatever you need. I'll have someone retrieve your things from your apartment. Just give us your address. And payment, Park added. We'll compensate you fairly for. We'll discuss payment later, Alice interrupted. Right now, I need coffee and access to his full medical chart. If I'm going to monitor him properly, I need to know everything Dr. Santos did in surgery. Kong Li nodded. I'll have Park get you coffee. And Miss Mwangi, thank you. You're saving his life again. I haven't saved anything yet, Alice said. He's still critical. The next 72 hours will determine if he survives. She took up her position in the chair beside Ji-Han's bed, pulling out her phone to review his vitals and surgical notes. Exhaustion pulled at her, but adrenaline and coffee would keep her functional. She'd committed to 72 hours. 3 days of watching over a man she barely knew but couldn't walk away from. 3 days in a world she didn't understand, protecting someone from enemies she couldn't see. Alice looked at Ji-Han's unconscious face and wondered what she'd just gotten herself into. The first 24 hours passed in tense vigilance. Alice monitored every vital sign, every fluctuation, every subtle change. Kong Lee stationed 2 guards outside the ICU room. Park checked in every 4 hours, bringing coffee, food, and eventually a bag with clothes from Alice's apartment. His initial suspicion gradually gave way to grudging respect as he saw Alice's dedication. Dr. Santos came by twice, nodding approvingly at Alice's meticulous notes. She was doing good work. She was keeping Ji-Han Jumong alive. And slowly, she was earning their trust. It was during hour 30 that everything changed. Alice had been reviewing Ji-Han's latest blood work when she noticed someone entering the room. A man in scrubs she didn't recognize, male, early 30s, carrying an A4 bag. "I'm here to change Mr. Jumong's 4, he said, his voice slightly uncertain. Alice frowned. "I wasn't notified of any 4 changes. Who authorized this?" "Dr. Santos. Standard protocol for patients in extended recovery." The man moved toward Ji-Han's bed with the new 4 bag. Something felt wrong. Alice stood, positioning herself between the stranger and Ji-Han. "What's your name?" "I don't recognize you, and I work this floor." "David. I'm from the overnight shift." He tried to move past her, but Alice blocked him. "The overnight shift doesn't start for another 4 hours. And I know everyone on overnight." "Show me your credentials." The man's expression shifted, something predatory entering his eyes. "Miss, I don't have time for this. Please step aside. Show me your credentials first." Alice's hand moved to the call button near Ji-Han's bed. "What department did you say you're from?" "I didn't." The man lunged forward, trying to grab the 4 line. Alice hit the call button and shouted, "Security. Intruder in ICU." The man's hand closed around the 4 bag. Alice grabbed his wrist, but he shrugged her off. The bag fell to the floor, clear liquid spilling across the tile. The door burst open. Park and another guard rushed in, weapons drawn. The fake nurse tried to run, but Park was faster. He slammed the man against the wall, pressing a gun to his temple. "Don't move," Park growled. Kong Lee arrived 30 seconds later, taking in the scene with cold fury. "What happened?" "He tried to change Ji-Han's 4, Alice said, her voice shaking with adrenaline. "Claimed Dr. Santos sent him, but he's not from this floor. I know everyone who works ICU. Couldn't show credentials. When I questioned him, he tried to force it through." Kong Lee knelt beside the spilled 4 bag, carefully lifting it with a handkerchief. He sniffed it, then his expression went murderous. "Not saline. Take him to the interrogation room. Now." Park and the other guard dragged the struggling man out. Alice's knees felt weak, but she forced herself to check Ji-Han's current 4 line, examining it closely for any signs of tampering. "You saved his life," Kong Lee said quietly. "Again. If that poison had entered his system." "Is that what it was? Poison? We'll know for certain after analysis, but yes. Someone hired him to finish what the car accident started." Kong Lee's eyes were cold with promise of retribution. "He'll tell us who. Eventually." Alice felt sick. She'd stopped an assassination attempt through nothing but instinct and training. But as she looked at Ji-Han, still unconscious and vulnerable, a new fear seized her. He's not safe here. If they got someone with stolen credentials into Northwestern's ICU, they can try again. Agreed. Kong Lee pulled out his phone, speaking rapidly in Korean. When he finished, he looked at Alice. Mr. Jumong is being moved. Tonight. To a facility where no one can find him. Miss Mwangi, I'm going to ask you to do something difficult. Come with us. To keep him alive while we figure out who's trying to kill him and why. Alice should have said no. Should have recognized how dangerous this was. Instead, she thought about Ji-Han's gray eyes looking at her as he whispered, "Help me." The electricity when he touched her wrist. "I'll come," she said quietly. Kong Li nodded with visible relief. "Thank you, Miss Mwangi." Over the next hour, Alice helped prepare Ji-Han for transport. Dr. Santos arrived, having been briefed on the situation, and assisted with disconnecting monitors, ensuring Ji-Han's condition was stable enough for the move. "His vitals are strong," Dr. Santos said. "He should survive the transport, but Alice, his condition is still critical. Moving him is a risk." "Staying here is a bigger risk," Alice replied. "At least wherever we're going, we'll know who has access to him." Dr. Santos nodded gravely. "I'll come with you. He'll need medical supervision for at least another week." The convoy that left Northwestern Memorial at 2 in the morning consisted of 6 SUVs. Alice rode in the center vehicle with Ji-Han, monitoring his vitals continuously during the drive. Dr. Santos sat across from her, both of them silent and focused. The facility Kong Li took them to was in Wisconsin, 2 hours from Chicago. Beautiful, set in wooded land, looking like a luxury cabin from outside. Inside, it was a fully equipped medical center. "This is it," Kong Li said as they settled Ji-Han into his new room. "In our world, you need places where people can heal without questions, without records. This facility will give us that." Alice's room was connected to Ji-Han's. She had everything she needed. Medical supplies. Comfortable furniture. But most importantly, immediate access to Ji-Han. The first 48 hours were critical. Alice barely slept, checking Ji-Han every hour, making notes of every change, every fluctuation. His body was healing, but slowly. The combination of the car accident trauma and whatever poison had been in that Ford bag he'd been exposed to had taken a severe toll. On the third day, his vitals began to decline. Alice was reviewing labs when she noticed it. Liver enzymes elevated. Kidney function dropping. His body was shutting down, poisoned by something the fake nurse had managed to get into his system before she stopped him. "Dr. Santos." Alice called, her voice tight with controlled panic. Dr. Santos came running. He looked at the monitors, at the lab results, and his face went gray. "He's in toxic shock. Whatever was in that some of it got into his system before you stopped it. We need to flush his system, start dialysis." "Wait." Alice was already moving to her bag, pulling out small cloth pouches she'd brought from her apartment. Herbs her grandmother had taught her to use. "My grandmother was a traditional healer in Kenya. She taught me about purging toxins, about herbs that can draw poison from the blood. Modern medicine might not be enough here. We need both." Dr. Santos looked at the herbs, then at Ji-Han's declining vitals. "What do you need?" "Hot water. Clean implements. And trust." For the next 6 hours, Alice worked. She made infusions from her grandmother's herbs, administered them through a new 4-line while Dr. Santos handled the modern medical interventions. She used techniques passed down through generations of Kenyan healers, combined with everything nursing school had taught her. It was the longest 6 hours of her life. Kong Li stood against the wall the entire time, watching, his presence a silent promise of violence if this didn't work. But slowly, gradually, Ji-Han's vitals began to stabilize. Liver enzymes leveled. Kidney function improved. The toxins were being purged from his system. When Alice was certain he was stable, she finally allowed herself to sink into a chair, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. Her hands trembled. Her whole body shook. "I'm lost for words, thank you for saving him," yet again, Kong Li said, his voice filled with something Alice had never heard from him before. Awe. Dr. Santos began reducing Ji-Han's sedation over the following days. His body has healed enough. It's time to see if he'll wake up. Could be hours. Could be days. So Alice watched and waited. On the second day after the crisis, Ji-Han's fingers twitched. Alice squeezed his hand gently. Come back. You can do this. On the third day, his eyes moved beneath closed lids. On the fourth day, he opened his eyes. Alice was alone with him, reading, when she felt the change. She looked up and met gray eyes. Unfocused at first, but clearing rapidly. And in those eyes, Alice saw recognition. Welcome back, Alice said softly, joy and relief flooding through her. You're in Wisconsin. In a private medical facility. You've been unconscious for 10 days. Do you remember what happened? Ji-Han's lips moved. No sound at first. Alice helped him drink water, small careful sips. Car, Ji-Han finally rasped. Accident. Sung. Alice felt her chest tighten. I'm sorry. Your driver didn't survive. Pain flickered across Ji-Han's face. Grief raw and unguarded. Good man. Better than me. He had family. He would be glad you lived, Alice said gently. Ji-Han's eyes focused on her more clearly, and Alice felt that electric connection again. You. From the street. The nurse who wouldn't let me die. I remember your voice. You told me to stay with you. Alice, she said. Alice Mwangi. And yes, that's me. You did more than that. Ji-Han's voice was getting stronger. Kong Lee told me, just before the sedation, before I lost consciousness. Told me you saved my life on that street. That you stayed with me at the hospital. That you caught someone trying to poison me. You were targeted, Alice confirmed. A man disguised as a nurse tried to inject poison into your fore. I stopped him, but some of the toxin had already entered your system. You almost died from it. Ji-Han's hand moved weakly, reaching for hers, and when their fingers touched, Alice felt that same electricity. How many times have you saved my life now? 3, technically. The street, catching the poisoning, and then treating the toxins when they nearly killed you anyway. 3 times. Something that might have been a smile. I owe you everything, Alice Mwangi. You don't owe me anything. I was just doing my job. No, Ji-Han said firmly. You did far more than your job. You saved my life when you had every reason to walk away. You're not American, are you? Alice hesitated, then decided honesty was best. I'm Kenyan. I came here for nursing school, stayed for work. My visa is secure now, but it wasn't always. Ji-Han's eyes widened slightly. And yet you stayed. Involved yourself with my people. Put yourself at risk to save me. Why? I don't know, Alice admitted. When I saw you dying on that street, something just pulled me forward. Like I was supposed to be there. Like you were supposed to survive. And when you opened your eyes and asked me to help you, I couldn't walk away. Fate, Ji-Han said softly. I believe in fate, Alice Mwangi. The universe puts people in our path for reasons we don't always understand immediately. You were put in my path for a reason. Alice felt her breath catch at the intensity in his gaze. This was dangerous territory. She barely knew this man. Didn't know what he did, what kind of life he led. But sitting here with his hand in hers, she couldn't make herself pull away. Over the following weeks, Alice settled into a routine at the Wisconsin facility. She monitored Ji-Han's recovery meticulously. The fractured ribs were knitting back together. The lung tissue was regenerating. The head trauma showed no lasting effects. The toxins were completely purged from his system. But more than just physical healing was happening. Alice found herself spending hours with Ji-Han. They talked during the long days, sharing stories. He told her about growing up in Seoul, about a father who'd built a business through honest work, about watching that father be destroyed by competitors who didn't play by rules. About deciding at 20 that rules were for people who could afford to lose. "I'm not a good man," he said one afternoon during physical therapy. "I've hurt people. Ordered things done that would land me in prison for life. You should know that, Alice." Alice looked at him. "I know you've lived a violent life. I've seen the evidence. The way your men move, the way they defer to you, the fact that someone tried to kill you twice. I'm not naive about what you do. And yet you're still here. I'm still here because you're my patient. Because I don't abandon people who need help." Alice helped him through another breathing exercise. "What you do outside this facility isn't my business." Ji-Han reached for her hand, that gesture that had become natural. "You're more than just my nurse, Alice. You know that, don't you?" Alice felt warmth spread through her at his touch, that electric current she'd felt since the accident. "I don't know what I am to you. You're the person who saved my life 3 times. The person I think about every moment I'm awake. The person whose presence makes me want to survive, not just exist." Ji-Han's gray eyes held hers. "I'm falling in love with you, Alice Mwangi. I don't know when it started. Maybe on that street when you put your hands in my chest and refused to let me die. Maybe during all these weeks watching you fight for me. But I'm falling, and I can't stop it." Alice's heart hammered. She should step back. Should maintain distance. Should remember the danger, the violence, the impossible differences between their worlds. Instead, she whispered, "I'm falling too." Ji-Han pulled her closer, and their lips met. The kiss was electric, claiming, full of weeks of tension and longing. Alice felt herself falling into it, into him, into something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Ji-Han rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me," he said roughly. "Not just as my nurse. Stay with me, Alice. Be with me." Alice wanted to say yes. Wanted to fall completely into this impossible connection. But fear held her back. Fear of his world. Fear of the violence she'd witnessed. Fear of losing herself in something she didn't fully understand. "I need time," she said softly. "Need to think about what this means. What it would mean to be with you." Pain flickered across Ji-Han's face, but he nodded. "Take the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." As the weeks passed, Ji-Han's strength returned. The physical therapist was amazed at his progress. Dr. Santos declared him fit for discharge. Even Kong Lee seemed to relax. But with recovery came the inevitable return to reality. To Chicago. To the people who tried to kill Ji-Han. "We need to discuss what happens next," Kong Lee said one evening. Alice was there, her presence simply accepted. "Tommy Lee and Victor Chen still believe you're incapacitated. That gives us an advantage. But it won't last forever. What have you learned?" Ji-Han asked, his voice carrying the authority Alice was beginning to recognize. "The car accident was orchestrated by Tommy Lee. He hired Marcus Kim to tamper with your vehicle. Carbon monoxide poisoning. Your driver Sung died from the crash impact, but the CO had already compromised his ability to control the vehicle." Kong Lee's jaw tightened. The hospital infiltration was also Tommy Lee. He hired David Chen, a low-level enforcer, to finish the job. "And Victor Chen?" Ji-Han's voice was ice. "Victor provided intelligence. Your schedule, your routes, Northwestern Memorial's ICU security protocols. He also arranged for David Chen to get stolen credentials that would pass initial security." Kong Lee's expression was grim. 20 years of partnership, and he betrayed you for Tommy Lee's promise of a larger territory split. Alice watched Ji-Han's face go glacial. Victor always was greedy. I should have seen it coming. There's more, Kong Lee said. Your wife. Ji-Han's expression didn't change. What about Yoon Seo? She's been meeting with lawyers. Asking about your estate, your assets, your will. She's also been seen with a younger man. Marcus. Her lover. They've been together for at least 8 months, possibly longer. Alice felt her stomach drop. Ji-Han was married. Of course he was married. She'd been falling for a married man. I see, Ji-Han said, his voice betraying nothing. Does she know I've recovered? No. As far as she knows, you're still in a coma at Northwestern with uncertain prognosis. I've been watching her closely. She's not involved in the assassination attempts, but she's certainly hoping you don't recover. The prenuptial agreement gives her nothing in a divorce, but as a widow, she'd inherit a substantial portion of your estate. Of course she would. Ji-Han's smile was cold. Handle it, Kong Lee. I want evidence of her infidelity. Every meeting with Marcus, every lie she's told, every conversation with lawyers. Document everything. Already done, sir. I have surveillance footage, financial records, phone logs. Everything you'll need. Good. Ji-Han stood, moving with strength that showed how much he'd healed. Then it's time to go home. Time to deal with Tommy Lee and Victor Chen. Time to reclaim what's mine. He looked at Alice, and she saw the question in his eyes. Would she come with him? Would she see this through? I'll come, Alice said quietly, making the decision even as fear twisted in her stomach. I'll see this through. Then I'll decide what comes next. Relief flooded Ji-Han's face. That's all I ask. The convoy that left Wisconsin consisted of 6 SUVs carrying 30 of Ji-Han's men. They drove through afternoon traffic toward Chicago, toward confrontation, toward an ending Alice couldn't predict. Alice sat between Ji-Han and Kong Lee, watching the landscape change from rural Wisconsin to urban Chicago. This was it. And now? Alice looked at him, at the genuine interest in his eyes. Now I feel less lost. Still scared. Still uncertain about the future. But less lost. Because of the visa being fixed? Partly. But also because. Alice trailed off, not sure how to finish. Because of this, Ji-Han said, gesturing between them. Whatever this is. Yes, Alice admitted. Because of this. They stood in comfortable silence, and Alice felt something shift inside her. This was dangerous. She was getting too attached, too invested in something that had an expiration date. But she couldn't seem to help it. On the evening before they were set to confront Tommy Lee, Kong Lee arrived with final intelligence. Tommy Lee will be at Club Eclipse tomorrow night, he said, spreading photos and diagrams across Ji-Han's desk. He goes every Friday. Conducts business in the VIP section, stays until closing. Security is heavy, but predictable. How many men? Ji-Han asked. 6 bodyguards in the club, 2 more with his car. His driver, Chen Wei, is former military. Very loyal, very competent. Ji-Han studied the photos. We'll take him when he leaves. Intercept the car before he reaches the club. Kill the driver, take control of the vehicle, bring Tommy Lee directly to me. Alice felt ice slide down her spine. This was real. This was happening. And Victor Chen? Kong Lee asked. Victor's smart. He'll run the moment he hears I'm alive. What's his most likely escape route? Airport. He has a private plane on standby at Midway. If he runs, that's where he'll go. Kong Lee pulled up a map. There's a stretch of road between his estate and the airport. Isolated. Perfect for an intercept. Then that's where we'll end him, Ji-Han said coldly. Make it look like an accident if possible. If not, execution style. I want people to know what happens to traitors. Alice listened to them plan murder with clinical precision. This was Ji-Han's world. This was who he really was beneath the vulnerability she'd seen during his recovery. The next evening, everything moved with terrible inevitability. Alice stayed at the penthouse while Ji-Han and 20 of his men went to intercept Tommy Lee. She paced her room, unable to sit, unable to rest, imagining everything that could go wrong. 2 hours later, her phone buzzed. A text from Kong Lee, package acquired. Returning to base. Alice's hands shook as she put the phone down. It was done. They had Tommy Lee. 30 minutes later, she heard the elevator arrive. Voices in Korean, sharp and commanding. Then Ji-Han appeared in her doorway. Come with me, he said. You should see this. Should understand completely who I am and what I do. Alice followed him to a room she hadn't seen before. Soundproofed, she realized immediately. No windows. A single chair in the center. Tommy Lee sat in that chair, bound and gagged, eyes wide with terror. Blood streaked his face from where he'd fought during capture. His expensive suit was torn, his confident demeanor completely shattered. Ji-Han walked slowly around the chair, studying the man who'd tried to kill him. Tommy Lee, Ji-Han said conversationally. Ambitious. Ruthless. Stupid enough to think you could kill me and take my territory. Did you really think it would work? Tommy Lee made muffled sounds behind the gag. Ji-Han gestured to Kong Lee, who removed it. Just get it over it, but this was all Victor's plan. Victor Chen. He set it up. He planned everything. I was just following his plan. I know. Victor will pay too. But you're first. You ordered the hit. You hired Marcus Kim to poison my car. You sent David to finish me in the hospital. Those were your choices and they come with consequences. Ji-Han pulled a knife from his jacket. Long, sharp, professional. Alice felt her stomach turn but couldn't look away. I could make this quick, Ji-Han said quietly. But you tried to kill me twice. Murdered my driver, a good man with a family. So I'm going to make sure you understand exactly what you've lost. Understand the price of betrayal. What happened next was brutal and efficient. Ji-Han drove the knife into Tommy Lee's chest with surgical precision. Not a killing blow, not immediately. Calculated to cause maximum pain while keeping him conscious. Tommy Lee screamed. Ji-Han twisted the knife. This is for Sung, Ji-Han said coldly. This is for every moment I spent unconscious, every moment Alice had to fight to keep me alive. This is for daring to think you could destroy what I built. He pulled the knife out, then drove it in again. Higher this time. Into the heart. Tommy Lee's eyes went wide, then empty. His body slumped in the chair. Ji-Han stepped back, blood on his hands and suit, his expression cold and empty. Clean this up, he said to his men. Then he turned and walked out, leaving Alice standing frozen, staring at the corpse. She found Ji-Han in his study, washing blood from his hands with mechanical precision. When he looked up and saw her in the doorway, something vulnerable flickered across his face. Now you've seen it, he said quietly. Seen what I really am. Seen what I'm capable of. This is my world, Alice. Violence and blood and death. This is who I am beneath everything else. Alice walked slowly into the room. She should have been horrified. Should have run. Instead, she understood. This was justice in his world. This was survival. This was a man protecting what was his with the only tools he had. I see you, Alice said simply. All of you. The man who's capable of terrible violence, yes. But also the man who grieved for his driver. The man who made sure Sung's family was taken care of. The man who's complex and contradictory and struggling to survive in an impossible world. Ji-Han looked at her like she was speaking a language he didn't understand. You're not running. I'm not running, Alice confirmed. Though her voice shook slightly. But I need time. Need to process what I just saw. Need to figure out if I can live in this world you inhabit. That's fair, Ji-Han said, though pain flickered in his eyes. The next morning, news came that Victor Chen had attempted to flee. Kong Li's men had intercepted him on the airport road, exactly as predicted. It's done, Kong Li reported to Ji-Han. Victor Chen is dead. Execution style, 2 shots to the head. His car was left on the side of the road. Police will find it within hours. Message sent. Ji-Han nodded with cold satisfaction. Good. And his organization? Already dismantled. His lieutenants have sworn loyalty to you or fled the city. By the end of the week, everything he built will be absorbed into your operations. Excellent. Ji-Han looked at Alice. It's finished. Tommy Lee dead, Victor Chen dead. The threats are eliminated. That afternoon, Ji-Han's wife Yun-seo arrived at the penthouse. She looked shocked to see him alive, standing in the living room, clearly recovered. Ji-Han, she breathed. You're awake. They told me you were still in a coma. They lied, Ji-Han said coldly. At my instruction. I wanted to see who would reveal themselves while they thought I was helpless. Thank you for playing your part so well. Yun-seo's face paled. What are you talking about? Ji-Han pulled out a tablet, tapped the screen. Video began to play. Yun-seo with Marcus. In restaurants. Hotels. His estate. Audio of conversations with lawyers, asking about inheritance, about how to access Ji-Han's assets if he died. I have months of evidence, Ji-Han said flatly. Every meeting, every lie, every moment you spent with your lover while pretending to be my devoted wife. You weren't involved in the attempts on my life, so I'm letting you live. But our marriage is over. He handed her a folder. Divorce papers. The prenuptial agreement gives you nothing, and I'm not feeling generous. You'll leave this building today with whatever you brought into our marriage and nothing more. Marcus can support you now. Yun-seo's hands shook as she looked through the papers. Ji-Han, please. Sign them. Or I'll release this evidence publicly and you'll leave with even less. Your choice. Yun-seo signed with tears streaming down her face. When she was done, Ji-Han gestured to Kong Li. Escort Mrs. Jumong out. She's no longer welcome here. Kong Li guided the sobbing woman to the elevator. The doors closed behind her, and she was gone. Ji-Han turned to Alice, and she saw exhaustion in his eyes. It's finished. Everything that threatened me is eliminated. Tommy Lee dead, Victor Chen dead, my faithless wife divorced. I'm free, Alice. Truly free for the first time in years. What will you do now? Alice asked quietly. That depends on you. Ji-Han moved closer. I told you to decide after this was over. After you'd seen everything. After you knew exactly who I am and what my life looks like. So I'm asking now. Will you stay? Will you build a life with me, knowing what that means? Alice looked into his gray eyes and saw hope mixed with fear. Saw a man who'd shown her every terrible thing about himself, expecting her to run, but desperately hoping she wouldn't. She thought about everything she'd witnessed. The violence. The blood. The cold efficiency with which he'd eliminated his enemies. But she also thought about the man who'd grieved for his driver. Who'd looked at her on that street and asked for help with such desperate hope? Who'd opened himself to her during recovery, showing her vulnerability he'd never shown anyone else? "I need time," Alice said finally. "Need to go back to my apartment, to my life, and think about everything without you here influencing my decision. Can you give me that?" Pain flickered across Ji-Han's face, but he nodded. "How much time?" "A few days. Maybe a week. I'll come back with an answer. And if that answer is no? If you decide you can't live in my world? Then I'll walk away, and you'll let me go. No pressure. No manipulation. Just acceptance. I promise," Ji-Han said, though his voice broke slightly on the words. Alice packed that night. Not everything, just enough for a few days. Enough to go back to her old apartment and try to remember who she'd been before Ji-Han Jumong crashed into her life. But as she packed, her heart felt heavy. Because she already knew the truth she wasn't ready to admit. She was in love with him. Loved his complexity, his vulnerability masked by ruthlessness, his fierce loyalty to the few people he trusted. Loved the way he looked at her like she was something precious. Loved the electricity between them, the way they fit together despite impossible differences. But love wasn't always enough. Love didn't erase the violence she'd witnessed. Didn't make his world safe or easy or compatible with the life she'd always imagined. So she needed time. Needed space. Needed to figure out if love was enough to build a life on, or if it would eventually be crushed under the weight of everything else. Ji-Han walked her to the car Kong Li had arranged. They stood in the penthouse lobby, neither knowing quite what to say. "Whatever you decide," Ji-Han said finally, "thank you. For saving my life. For staying when you didn't have to. For seeing me, really seeing me, and not running immediately. That's a gift I never expected to receive." Alice felt tears slide down her cheeks. "You're welcome." She stood on her toes and kissed him. Poured everything she was feeling into it, all the love and confusion and fear and longing. When she pulled away, Ji-Han's eyes were wet. "Goodbye, Ji-Han Jumong. Goodbye, Alice Mwangi." The drive to her old apartment felt surreal. Alice stared out the window at familiar streets, trying to reconcile the person she'd been 2 months ago with who she was now. Her apartment was exactly as she'd left it. Small. Cramped. Dark. She walked through it like a stranger, touching familiar things that no longer felt like hers. She tried to sleep in her old bed. Couldn't. The space felt wrong, empty, lonely. She tried to imagine going back to her old shifts at Northwestern, saving anonymous patients, living the quiet life she'd always planned. Couldn't picture it anymore. Everything had changed. She had changed. And she couldn't go back to who she'd been before, no matter how hard she tried. Alice spent 3 days in her apartment, thinking, remembering, trying to make sense of her feelings. She thought about the violence she'd witnessed. About Tommy Lee dying on that chair, about the cold precision with which Ji-Han had eliminated his enemies. About the world of blood and power she'd glimpsed. But she also thought about Ji-Han's vulnerability during recovery. About the way he'd opened up to her, sharing pieces of himself he'd never shown anyone. About the electricity between them, the connection that transcended logic and reason. She thought about her grandmother, about the wisdom passed down through generations. About how life was complex, how people were rarely just good or just bad, how love meant accepting the whole person, not just the easy parts. And she thought about herself. About who she was, what she wanted, what kind of life would make her happy. By the 3rd morning, Alice knew the truth. Had probably known it from the beginning, but needed the space to admit it to herself. She loved Ji-Han Jumong. Loved him enough to accept his world, his violence, his complexity. Loved him enough to build something new, something that honored both where she came from and where she was going. She went back to the penthouse that morning. When Ji-Han saw her in the doorway, hope and fear warring on his face, she simply said, "I'm staying. I choose you. I choose us." Ji-Han pulled her into his arms, and Alice felt the last piece click into place. 3 months had passed, and Alice had never been happier. The penthouse had become home in ways she couldn't have imagined. She'd returned to work at Northwestern part-time, maintaining her nursing skills while also serving as Ji-Han's personal physician for his continued recovery monitoring. Ji-Han was different too. Softer in private moments, though still ruthless in business. They'd found a rhythm together: her medical rounds in the morning, his business in the afternoon, their evenings together overlooking the city. "I have a follow-up appointment with Dr. Santos today," Ji-Han mentioned one morning over breakfast. "Routine blood work, final check on my recovery. Want to come with me?" "Of course," Alice said, smiling. "I want to see his face when he realizes how well you've healed." The appointment was routine. Dr. Santos examined Ji-Han thoroughly, reviewed the healing of his surgical sites, checked his lung function. Everything was perfect. "Remarkable recovery," Dr. Santos said with genuine admiration. "I've rarely seen someone bounce back from that level of trauma so completely. Your vitals are excellent, Ji-Han. You're a medical success story." "I had excellent care," Ji-Han said, glancing at Alice with warmth in his eyes. "Indeed." Dr. Santos made notes in his file. "Now, we're going to run comprehensive blood work today. Standard post-trauma panel, but I also want to check some genetic markers, hemoglobin variants, that sort of thing. Given your age and the trauma you endured, it's good to have a complete baseline for future reference." "Whatever you think is necessary," Ji-Han agreed. Alice held his hand during the blood draw, both of them relaxed and comfortable. This was just routine. Just standard medical care for someone who'd been through major trauma. They left the hospital and spent the afternoon together, talking about the future for the first time without reservation. Ji-Han mentioned possibly stepping back from some of his more dangerous operations, delegating more to Kong Li. Alice talked about maybe doing medical outreach work, using her grandmother's herbal knowledge combined with modern medicine to help underserved communities. Everything felt possible. Everything felt right. 3 days later, Dr. Santos called Alice's phone. "Alice, I need you and Ji-Han to come back to the hospital. Today, if possible. There's something in his blood work we need to discuss." Alice's stomach dropped. "What is it? Is something wrong with his recovery?" "No, nothing like that. His recovery markers are perfect. But there's something else. Something important. I'd rather discuss it in person." An hour later, they sat in Dr. Santos's office. The doctor looked uncomfortable, which made Alice's anxiety spike. "Ji-Han, your blood work came back with an important finding," Dr. Santos began carefully. "You have the sickle cell trait. You carry one sickle cell gene and one normal hemoglobin gene. It's not a disease, and it doesn't affect your health in any meaningful way. You're a carrier." Ji-Han frowned. "I didn't know that. My parents never mentioned it. It's common in certain populations, and many people don't know they're carriers unless specifically tested." Dr. Santos looked at Alice. "Alice, given that you're from Kenya, have you ever been tested for sickle cell trait?" Alice felt ice slide down her spine. She knew exactly where this was going. "Yes," she said quietly. "I was tested in nursing school. I'm as too. Sickle cell trait." The room went very quiet. Dr. Santos nodded slowly, sympathy in his eyes. "Then you both understand what this means. If you were to have biological children together, there would be a 25% chance with each pregnancy that the child would have sickle cell disease. SS genotype. 2 copies of the sickle cell gene." Alice couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. She'd seen children with sickle cell disease during her rotations. The pain crises, the hospitalizations, the shortened lifespans, the suffering. There are options, Dr. Santos continued, his voice gentle. IVF with preimplantation genetic diagnosis. You could screen embryos and only implant those without the disease. Adoption is another possibility. Or we don't have children, Ji-Han said flatly, reaching for Alice's hand. That's what you're not saying. That's the safest option. That's a decision only you two can make, Dr. Santos said carefully. I'm just providing the medical information. I'll give you some time to process this. If you have questions, I'm here. They left the hospital in silence. The drive back to the penthouse felt eternal. Alice stared out the window, her mind racing, her heart breaking. When they got home, Ji-Han pulled her into his arms. It's okay. We'll figure this out. How? Alice's voice cracked. How do we figure this out, Ji-Han? IVF with genetic screening. Dr. Santos said it's possible. We could. Do you know how expensive that is? How invasive? How many cycles it might take? Alice pulled away, pacing the living room. And there's no guarantee it would even work. Money isn't an issue. You know that. Ji-Han moved toward her. Alice, I have resources. We can afford whatever treatment. It's not just about money. Alice felt tears streaming down her face. It's about everything. About risk and responsibility and what's right. Then we adopt, Ji-Han said firmly. There are thousands of children who need homes. We can give a child a better life, a family, everything they need. We don't need biological children to be a family. Alice looked at him, at his gray eyes full of determination and love, and felt something break inside her. But I do, she whispered. I need biological children, Ji-Han. I need to carry a baby, to give birth, to see my mother's eyes or my grandmother's smile in a child's face. I need that connection to my ancestry, my heritage. I need to continue the line. Ji-Han's face went pale. Alice. I've always dreamt about having kids. Then we do the IVF, Ji-Han said desperately. However many cycles it takes. Whatever it costs. We screen the embryos, we make sure. And what if it doesn't work? What if we spend years trying and failing? What if I'm 40 by the time we succeed, if we succeed? Alice wrapped her arms around herself. What if we have a child and despite all the screening, something goes wrong? What if? What if we're just happy together? Ji-Han interrupted, moving to cup her face in his hands. What if we choose each other over children? What if this love, this connection, this impossible thing we've built is enough? Alice looked into his eyes and saw everything she'd ever wanted. Love. Partnership. Home. I'm 25, Alice said quietly. You're 37. We both have time. We could try IVF for a few years and see what happens. I will think about it. Then we find a way, Ji-Han said, his voice rough with desperation. We find a way to make this work. Alice, I love you. I've never loved anyone the way I love you. Don't let biology destroy what we have. This is too much, Alice said, tears flowing freely now. Can't ask you to adopt when I know it wouldn't be the same for me. Can't ask you to watch me resent you slowly for the children I never had. You wouldn't resent me. I would, Alice said, and the honesty broke her. Maybe not now. Maybe not in a year. But eventually, I would. Every time I saw a mother with a baby. Every time my parents asked about grandchildren. Every time I remembered what I gave up. I would resent you, and that would poison everything beautiful we have. Ji-Han's face crumpled. So what are you saying? That we just give up? After everything we've been through, everything we've overcome, we let this defeat us? We let this inform us, Alice said softly. We let this be the painful truth that saves us from years of slow heartbreak. We love each other, Ji-Han. God, I love you so much it physically hurts. But love isn't always enough. Sometimes love means letting go. No. Ji-Han's voice was hard. No, I won't accept that. We can make this work. We can. You can't fix this. Alice's voice rose. For once in your life, you've encountered a problem you can't solve with money or power or determination. You can't threaten biology into submission. You can't force our blood to be compatible. You can't make me okay with never having biological children. This is one thing you absolutely cannot fix. The words hung between them like a death sentence. Ji-Han sank into a chair, looking older than his 37 years. Defeated in a way Alice had never seen, not even when he was dying on that street. I need time, Alice said quietly. I need to think. Need to process this. How much time? Ji-Han's voice was hollow. I don't know. But I need space to figure out what I can live with and what I can't. Alice went to her room, the room that had become theirs over the past months, and closed the door. She sat on the bed where they'd shared so much joy, so much love, so much hope for the future. And she thought about everything. She thought about genetic screening and IVF cycles and the statistical probability of success. She thought about adoption and whether she could truly love a child that didn't carry her grandmother's blood, her mother's features, her own genetic legacy. She thought about Ji-Han, about his gray eyes and his terrible vulnerabilities and the way he'd fought death 3 times to stay with her. About the life they could build together, childless but full of love and purpose. She thought about herself. 25. At the peak of her fertility. With dreams of pregnancy and childbirth and nursing her own baby. Dreams she couldn't just abandon, no matter how much she loved Ji-Han. She thought about resentment. About how slowly it builds, how it poisons love, how it turns devotion into bitterness. About how she'd seen it in patients' families, the sacrifices made with love that eventually become weapons of quiet anger. And she thought about Ji-Han at 37, still young enough to have children naturally with someone else. Someone whose blood was compatible. That wasn't fair to him. Wasn't fair to ask him to waste years on IVF cycles that might never work when he could find someone else and build the family he deserved. By 3 in the morning, Alice knew what she had to do. She would write him a letter. Because staying would mean him convincing her. Alice pulled out paper and pen, her hands shaking, tears blurring her vision. And she began to write. My dearest Ji-Han. I'm writing this with tears in my eyes, trying to explain a decision that breaks my heart even as I know it's the right one. I love you. I need you to know that first and always. I love you with everything I am. I love you the way I've never loved anyone, the way I didn't think I was capable of loving. But love isn't enough. I've learned that these past 3 days of thinking and crying and hoping for a solution that doesn't exist. Love isn't enough when biology itself stands between us. I love you too much to watch our beautiful, impossible love turn ugly over the years. Love you too much to become the woman who gave up her dreams and spent the rest of her life regretting it. So I'm leaving. Because I love you too much to destroy us slowly. This is hard for me, but I'm doing it anyway. Because sometimes love means letting go. Please forgive me for not being strong enough to stay. All my love, always. Alice. Alice folded the letter with shaking hands. She placed it on the pillow beside where Ji-Han would have slept if she were staying. Then she packed. Only the clothes she'd brought, only the few personal items that were truly hers. She left behind everything he'd given her. The expensive clothes, the jewelry, the gifts. She took only herself. Dawn was breaking over Chicago as Alice called for a car. Not Kong Lee. A regular taxi. She didn't want Ji-Han's people involved in this. Didn't want them trying to stop her. The penthouse was quiet. Ji-Han was asleep in his study, exhausted from their emotional confrontation. Alice was grateful. She couldn't face him again. Couldn't risk him convincing her to stay. She took one last look at the penthouse. At the home she'd built here. At the life she was leaving behind. Then she walked out the door and didn't look back. Ji-Han woke at noon, disoriented, his neck stiff from falling asleep at his desk. He'd stayed in the study to give Alice space, hoping that by morning she'd have found some clarity, some path forward for them. He went to their bedroom, hoping to find her awake, ready to talk. The room was empty. The bed made. Her closet cleaned out. Panic seized him. He ran through the penthouse, calling her name, checking every room. She was gone. And on the pillow, a letter. Ji-Han's hands shook as he picked it up. As he read words that carved pieces out of his heart with every sentence. He read it once. Twice. 3 times. Each reading hurt worse than the last. By the time he finished the 3rd reading, Kong Li had found him, alerted by security that Alice had left the building hours ago. "Sir," Kong Li said carefully. "Should I bring her back?" Ji-Han looked at the letter, at Alice's familiar handwriting, at words written with love and pain in equal measure. "Don't come after me. Please. Let me go with the dignity of my own choice." "No," Ji-Han said, his voice hollow. "Let her go." "Sir." "She's right," Ji-Han said, and felt something inside him break completely. "About all of it. I can't give her what she needs. I can't fix this. And chasing her, convincing her to stay, would only hurt us both more in the end." Kong Li was quiet for a long moment. "I'm sorry, sir." "So am I." Ji-Han stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at Chicago, the city where he'd nearly died, where Alice had saved him, where they'd built something impossible that couldn't last. He thought about her hands in his chest, breathing life back into his lungs. Thought about her fierce determination to keep him alive through poisoning. Thought about her love that had made him want to be better than he was. He thought about blood and biology and the cruel irony that after overcoming every other impossible obstacle, assassination attempts, cultural differences, dangerous worlds, they'd been defeated by something as simple as genetics. 2 people who'd found impossible love, separated by something neither could control. Ji-Han pressed his hand against the cold glass and let himself break. Let himself grieve for the future he'd glimpsed and lost. For the woman who'd loved him enough to leave. For the life they could have built if only their blood had been different. Somewhere over the Atlantic, Alice was crying too. Flying back to Kenya. Back home. Back to a life that made sense even if it felt empty now. And in Chicago, Ji-Han Jumong stood alone in his penthouse, holding a letter written with love and loss, wondering if he'd ever feel whole again. Some love stories don't have happy endings. Some loves are real and true and beautiful and still not enough. This was one of those loves. The end. Hope you enjoyed the story. Please subscribe to the channel to support what we do. Thank you.